1 Kings 19, and we're looking at the depression that Elijah fell into. And I suggested a few reasons why he was depressed. One was that he was physically exhausted, and that a mood had taken hold of him when his body was not able to cope with it. The second reason was that he was left on his own, so he thought, and he was trying to struggle with a sense of destiny, but he needed sympathetic friends and found none. He said, "It's enough, I want to die." But the third reason was he had nothing to do. Sometimes you want to do things, like when people have worked and worked and then they retire, and then the day they retire, it's quite a blow, isn't it, to think, I have nothing to do. So he became depressed. And the fourth reason was that he had expected to succeed against the prophets of Baal on Carmel. It looked fantastic, and then all of a sudden the reality was that he was in danger of being killed himself. And so he had a disappointment in the expectation of success. Maybe you have a hope or a dream for something, and you pin all your hopes on it, and then all of a sudden when that goes, you lose heart. You become dispirited, frustrated, and depressed. It's a pit that you get stuck into. But what's interesting is the way that God dealt with it. And first, if you read on from chapter 19, verse 4, you read that God gave him food. You may think that's a small thing, but if somebody is exhausted, sitting them down, calming them down, and giving them a meal ain't such a bad deal. So God gave food and rest and exercise, and then, not until then, he starts to talk to him. Because Elijah couldn't think properly. There's no point talking to somebody if they just need their body taken care of. You know what I'm saying? When God deals with our depression, he gets the outward stuff sorted first and then moves inward. And secondly, God, interestingly, seemed to use nature to reflect Elijah's mind. You remember the earthquake and the storm and the fire, and God wasn't in those things. It's like those things were a kind of picture of what was going on inside Elijah. All of this expressed and reflected his feelings. Elijah's spirit rose with the spirit of the storm. He was a wild, defiant guy. But God wasn't in it. God wasn't in the storm, not the fire, not the earthquake. So it's like Elijah's inside was being reflected on the canopy of the sky. And then he arrived at the calm and still voice when God was speaking to him. Sometimes people have got to get it out of their system. They've got to go through the storm of doubt before they arrive at faith, or the storm of fear before they arrive at the hand of Jesus on the tiller of their life, saying, "Peace, be still." Job, for example, has certainly come to the end of himself before he really arrived at the beginning of where God was. Because sometimes you don't hear God in the sunshine. You sense him through the storm, or afterwards you hear him in the roaring of the storm. "You shall see me, and you shall know that your Redeemer lives." Do you believe that? And so God made him feel what life was about. He said to him a couple of very simple things. He said, "What are you doing here, Elijah? Sulking, sitting by yourself, exhausted. What are you doing here? What are you doing here? Life is for doing, Elijah. You have a calling. I have something for you. What are you doing? What are you doing? Just bemoaning your fate." Now, sometimes you have to say to yourself, move on, get a grip, get yourself together and move on. Don't think that ultimately your life is about you. God has work for you that no one else can do. God has work for you to do. And so he says, "Elijah, what are you doing here? Arise. Go on your way. Don't brood. Don't allow yourself to get bored. Get on with it." And then, just at the end, when you think that all God's doing is slapping him in the face, God really assures him of victory. He says, "I still have 7,000 in Israel who haven't bowed the knee to this false god Baal. You think you're the only one? No, Elijah, no. Your work has had fruit. What you have done has got value. You are important in my estimation. Don't give up now, mate. Arise, go on your way. There are 7,000 people who are demonstrating that you did not live or die in vain. No sacrifice that you've made was made in vain. Jesus said, even a cup of cold water in my name will not lack its reward. And Jesus himself went right through that Elijah moment, right through the moment of apparent failure and defeat. Why have you forsaken me? It is finished. And if the cross says anything, it says that apparent defeat is real victory. That God has a different way of measuring success. So we have to distinguish between the real and the apparent. Elijah's apparent success was in the shouts of victory on Mount Carmel, but the real success was in 7,000 quiet believers who trusted God. He said, no, Elijah, your work has had fruit. You just don't see it yet. So you mustn't get depressed. You mustn't get low or feeling that your work, your life has had no impact or importance, because you are not capable of measuring those things. You cannot estimate your own value. And when it's all said and done, as Mother Teresa said, at the final analysis, I am not called to a ministry of success. I am called to a ministry of obedience. Get up, get on your way, and do what God set you to do. Amen. God bless you.